Morning everyone, welcome along to another episode of No Boundaries. I'm Laura McGoldrick and joining me today is of course the wonderful Mike Hesson. And for the first time on this show, and I'd be disappointed if he wasn't wearing his cheese cutter, Craig McMillan is joining us. Hello gentlemen. Craig, how are you?
Hello Laura, hello Hess. Yep, I'm great, thanks. Great to be on board.
Hess, you are looking sharp today.
Yeah, thank you Laura. Just a little family thing to do this morning, and obviously thought I'd dress up for the show.
I thought you were going to say this is regular for me. This is just a casual day out, of course. Look, guys, let's crack straight into it. I want to talk to you. We have now got ourselves new World Test champions. New Zealand no more. It is, in fact, Australia that is the current champions, which is, I mean, a lot of us feel some certain things about that. I perhaps would have liked to see India have a crack at it, given it was their second time to the party, but not to be. Hess, I'll start with you. What did you make of the game as a whole?
Yeah, I think India were given a bit of a leg up with obviously winning the toss and obviously weren't able to take advantage of that. I think the key partnership was really Head and Smith in that first innings where, you know, India had a little bit of an in, sort of 3 for 80, 3 for 90, and then obviously weren't able to capitalise. And Travis Head sort of, he took his chances, but he played with some real intent and took the game away pretty quickly. So even by the end of day one, India were very much fighting to stay in the test match rather than looking to dictate it after winning the toss. So, you know, they scrapped pretty hard for 3 days, and heading into yesterday, I had a little bit of hope for India, or had a bit of hope as a contest. I thought with Kohli and Rahane there, who both looked in good touch at the end of the fourth day, I thought we might have seen a close contest, but as soon as Kohli went and then Jadeja in the same over, it was a bit of an anticlimax really, and to be fair, Australia in the end deserved the win.
Yeah, they were just too good, and I want to talk about Scotty Boland because that's actually one of the Aussie stories I really enjoy, how he's come to the fore and on such a world stage like that. Macca, I'd love your thoughts on the game. Do you think India missed a trick on particularly day one after winning the toss? You know, it looked a good toss to win, but then to leave out Ashwin, maybe they'll have some regret around that. I saw Sachin Tendulkar today came out and said he doesn't understand what the thinking behind that was. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I tend to agree, and that's quite big coming from Sachin because he doesn't tend to make many comments on social media around team selection, especially with Rahul Dravid as head coach. So I think they missed a trick there by not playing Ashwin. Australia have got 5 left-handers in their top 8. So I think Ashwin, being the competitor he is, both Hess and I have worked with Ashwin in the IPL a few years ago. We know what a competitor he is. He would have been an asset, and I think they missed the trick because they picked a bowling lineup for day one. They picked 4-seamers, and really those 4-seamers were only ever really in play on day one. And then they bowled poorly in those conditions, so they put themselves on the back foot. They bowled nicely. It's called pretty bowling because it's a touch short, and they allowed the Australian batters to play too much off the back foot, which gave them a bit of a leg up. So they needed to be fuller in their length on day one, and winning the toss should have been quite a big advantage. It wasn't, and from that stage on, Australia were just at their clinical best, really. 2 big hundreds and test matches. Well, test matches are won on a big first innings total, which Australia did. And the Indian batsmen just couldn't get that big score. There was a lot of starts, especially in that second innings as well yesterday. But no one kicked on. So all in all, you have to say Australia outplayed India overall for 5 days and we were worthy winners.
When we look at the venue itself, held at the Oval this time round, Hess, you've been to a lot of cricket matches over in England. Do you agree that it should stay in England, the final should be in England, or should it now be in Australia next time?
Oh, look, I like the fact that it's in England. I mean, let's say the home of cricket, but I mean, I would prefer it to be played at Lord's, but I think the Oval is a really good cricket wicket. I think it actually brings in all types of bowlers. I mean, obviously seam bowlers, we talk about Ashwin not playing, but Lyon got 4 in the second innings. Jadeja got 3. It does turn, it does bounce. If you get past the new ball, you can score at a quick rate. So the game can change quickly. And it's actually a really nice place to play. And I don't think it's a particular advantage to either one of the senior nations or one of the Asian nations. So I think it's actually a really good location to play. It'll always be well supported, in terms of the location. So you don't have to worry about playing in front of half-filled stadiums. So, look, I quite like the idea. As I said, if it was in favour of a particular nation, then no. But I don't think the Oval is. I think it's well suited to a variety of countries, and you can tell by the history it's created. But, I do tend to agree with Macca in terms of, I think India picked a team that suits them on day one. And that's something that often many teams fall into. They look at the pitch, they think, what's our best attack for day one, without actually thinking about the rest of the Test match. So I think India will look back on that, just like they did probably 2 years ago when they actually played both spinners in Southampton with a whole heap of rain around, and they went with two spinners and they didn't play a part. So I'm not so sure they got the selection right on either occasion, to be fair.
And just as an aside, I've always found that they've done their PIMS that bit better as a spectator in England. So that's always a real plus when you are watching a Test match if you do it right. Macca, like Hess, you know a lot about the venues over in England. Did you think that the Oval held up to its expectation, the fact that this was a final?
Yeah, I did. I really liked it, and I agree with Hess. It's a good cricket wicket. Doesn't suit anyone in particular. So it's probably as neutral as you can get for two very different teams. I just think India made mistakes. They didn't get it right on day one when they should have had an advantage. And Australia are in a good space. I think they've got a good balance to their side. They've got players in form and confident. And I think the fact that it went 5 days, again, it was a good advertisement for Test cricket. If I'm being totally honest, for world cricket, it probably would have been better if India had won in terms of Test cricket, moving ahead and keeping the stature of the game. But India continued 2 finals in 4 years. They've done pretty well. Hopefully they'll continue to put Test cricket at the top of their priority list, and maybe it might be third time lucky for them.
Maybe. If we look at this Australian side, we've talked a bit about the mistakes that India have made. Yes, but Australia are a very, very good side, and that might not be great for Test cricket at the moment, but they're in a good spot coming into the Ashes. When, you hear the likes of Hazelwood's out, everyone panics, but then Boland comes in and plays the way he did. Hess, you'd have to say that Australia don't have much to be nervous about going into this Ashes series.
Well, they've certainly got depth of seam bowling, haven't they? I think if Lyon was to get injured, they probably don't have the cover in that space, and he obviously, when you only play 4 bowlers, I guess 4.5 with Green, then he has to play a massive role. But outside of that, their seam resources are vast. They've even got Michael Neser as well. I think Hazelwood, by the sound of things, will be right for the first test. I thought Stark got better as this test match went on. He was pretty ordinary at times, but finished the test match well. Cummins, if he sorts out his no-ball problems quickly, then, they're kind of back to their best from a bowling perspective. And we saw with the bat that, batting right down to 7 with Alex Carey, they've got some real quality in there. So I think they will be confident heading into the Ashes, but I do think the Ashes will be a heck of a lot stronger than it has been as a competition, and it has been in recent times. And Scott Boland, he is that story that even New Zealanders love, don't they? He's that unfashionable cricketer. Probably did not expect to play Test cricket, and he's made every poster winner, so fair play to him.
Macca, you've been obviously involved in a great series, a great Test series here in New Zealand with England and New Zealand. It, got close, great cricket played by both sides. I don't think I ever, as a cricket fan, remember this amount of hype, certainly in New Zealand, about a series, particularly an Ashes series here in New Zealand. Like, I am so excited for what is to come. And as a cricket fan and a former cricketer yourself, you must be chomping at the bit for this to get going.
Yeah, can't wait. Not looking forward to the late nights, early mornings, to be fair, Laura, but it's going to be spectacular. I think the fact that Brendan McCullum is head coach of England means that there's a New Zealand flavour to the series, which has grabbed everyone's attention. And you're right, I don't think we're probably headed into an Ashes series with both teams pretty much level pegging. I personally have Australia just ahead in terms of being perhaps favouritism, just because, as Hess mentioned, I think in the spin bowling department, Nathan Lyon gives them a big advantage. And really interesting that England have recalled Moeen Ali, who's come out of Test match retirement, which to me is an interesting selection because Brendan McCullum's been very aggressive, attacking with what he's done with that England side. It's almost a defensive measure for me because Moeen Ali has really struggled against Australia in Test match cricket. He's played 16 tests, averages 64 with the ball. So he's been recalled. Hasn't got a great record against Australia. The more attacking move, I think, would have been to have played the young 18-year-old leg spinner. Some people might say that might be throwing the youngster to the lambs, but I think that would have been the more aggressive attacking approach that you expect to see from England. So I think Australia have that advantage. The pitches in England turn, especially if it's dry and sunny like we've seen in the World Test Championship final at the Oval. The sun was out. Pitches will turn on days 3, 4 and 5, and the spinner will play a big part. So that is perhaps the one area that there will be some concern for England.
Okay, so Mac is picking Aussies just by a little bit there to perhaps clinch this series. What about you, Hess? What do you think? Who do you think is... Australia now the World Test Champ. That's not the confidence I needed that team to have going into this series. You know what I mean?
Look, I'm actually going to go slightly the other way. I think England are riding a real wave. I think Brendan's influence, Ben Stokes' influence has been dramatic. And I hopefully think... I'm hoping that the likes of Mo and Ali bringing him in that role means that they're going to have a little bit of spice in the wickets. Because I think England's bowling attack need a little bit of nibble in the surfaces. I don't think they can operate with flat surfaces. I think if they do, Australia will be too good. And I also think Australia, with the likes of Boland, because he's quite metronomic in terms of the lengths he bowls, and India allowed him to bowl, I don't think England will. I think they'll actually take it to him. I think they'll look to come down the wicket, try and take him off his length, and actually do something a little bit out of the ordinary, which as a spectator is what you want to see. You want to see if Scott Boland can adjust. If players start walking down the wicket at him, taking him on, does he have some variations that are going to dictate that, or are they just going to let him, play around with his different seam positions and become an absolute handful? So I really can't wait, to be honest. It's going to be a heck of a series, but I think England are just going to pip them.
Okay, well, we will find out very soon. Macca, for us, fans of cricket, Test cricket particularly, we've been long harping on about how great this format of the game is. It feels like everyone's starting to get into it now. And the state of Test cricket, I don't think I've ever recall in my time as a cricket fan it being in such a strong spot in terms of the fan sport. Like, with the England series, the Bangladesh series, there were fans on all of the days here in New Zealand over at the Oval. It was great to see it full like that. What do you think of the state of Test cricket?
Well, it's a special format, Laura. It really is. I mean, it's one of those games over the 5 days that ebbs and flows, can chop and change. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time to get into a strong position in the match. And we saw a couple of stellar Test matches over the New Zealand summer. So it's quite different to 50 over and T20 cricket. You talk to the players, it's a format they enjoy playing. I get the feeling that at times it's getting squeezed out of the international calendar with a number of the T20 tournaments, franchises that are happening around the world. That's something that the ICC is going to have to be very careful about. That's why perhaps it might have been better for Test cricket if India had won this Test championship and had been champions for the next 2 years, then it would have been high on their list. Hopefully they've still got that dangle, I suppose, that carrot that they're still keen to be World Test champions, so they'll continue to champion the cause. But I'm pretty happy with where it's at. There's times when there's a 2 Test match series that I'd really like 3, but I guess international cricket window's getting smaller and smaller, and the scheduling's becoming harder and harder for international boards. So at the moment, you have to say it's in a strong position, but that could change quickly. So we have to continue to look after it.
We do have to continue to look after it. The T20 game's certainly not going anywhere, Hess. So with a one-day World Cup this year, we're starting to ask some questions of where that 50-over game sits. Like, I still love 50-over cricket. I absolutely like to hope that there's a place for it in the cricket calendar. But if we are getting squeezed, that seems to be the format that's in the most danger, don't you think?
Yeah, well, especially bilateral series. I think the bilateral, there used to be sort of 5-7 ODI series. I think those days are gone. I think that you might have the odd 3, but I think it'll almost become like T20 World Cups used to be, where there was no international T20s until there were World Cups. And I think it might not quite get to that point, but I think the amount of ODIs between World Cups will diminish dramatically. The revenue stream is obviously in T20s. The international T20 appetite from spectators has grown. So there'll certainly be more of those between World Cups. And as I said, as Macca alluded to, I think Test match cricket has enough interest from enough countries to still keep it at the status quo. I think the World Test Championship has just kept it alive a little bit, so hopefully that will continue. But yeah, you're right, something's got to give, and I think the bilateral ODI series will start to probably, maybe not disappear, but certainly diminish.
So let's move on to New Zealand cricket now, and they have released their list of contracted players for the next 12 months of international cricket. As you can see here, a few omissions, a couple of talking points. No Ajaz Patel, after what was an extraordinary feat over in India not so long ago, taking, of course, those 10 wickets for the innings. And Trent Boult is, this is an interesting one for me, Macca, and I'd love your thoughts on this. He gets a flexi contract. First I've ever heard New Zealand offered flexi contracts. And look, I'd love to find out a bit more about them, but I don't know. How do you feel? It feels like a different set of rules for different players.
Yeah, how flexi's flexi? It's a real interesting one, and obviously the landscape is changing. I think New Zealand cricket are trying to move with that. But it seemed only 12 months ago Trent Boult was more than happy to make his decision, move away from international cricket, and take the riches of the T20 franchises around the world. And you couldn't bemoan him that he'd had a wonderful career for New Zealand, been a great servant. And now's almost wants a little bit of $1 each way. So it's a difficult one. I don't think, for me, and maybe I'm old school, and Hess will probably tell you I am, but playing for your country still has to be your priority, still has to be your main engagement. And that perhaps doesn't provide the money of some of the other leagues going around the world, but New Zealand cricket allow players to go and play in the IPL, which is quite a big window, so that they can earn a decent income from that professional T20 league. But I have an issue when players are coming back, and if they're trying to pick and choose when they play for New Zealand, that doesn't sit overly well with me. I'm sure it doesn't sit that well with some of the other players within the setup who are doing their hard yards and then have to move back. The one thing I'll say about Trent Boult, we know he's been a world-class bowler for a long time, and there's no doubt about that, but he's a very different bowler now than what he was even 2 years ago. So you just have to be careful with, how much he's playing, because the preparation for him will be very different heading into a 50 over World Cup than what it is for some of the other players. If he's fit and available and at his best, then he's obviously an asset to the side, but it's something that New Zealand cricket are going to have to get their head around, because I guess there's other players who could well be in a similar situation, and do they get flexi contracts, or where do they sit at?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and maybe I'm old school too, but I think that New Zealand cricket should be looking after those people that have given so much to the game and who prioritise and always put first playing for New Zealand. Yes, I know you're a very proud Kiwi, and you'll totally get that as a former coach of this New Zealand side. You want players playing for you that are 100% committed. So how do you feel about the flexi contract option?
Yeah, it's muddy water, isn't it? I think that, once you've got those contracts in place, and there was a lot of time spent between the CPA, New Zealand Cricket, the major associations, coming up with quite a long contract period. And they all committed to that and said that, this is the revenue share and so forth. It just gets really untidy when you've got 20 contracts or 25, whatever many's on that list now. And then you have an extra one, and then next year you might have 3 extra ones. And it just gets untidy, and you're dead right in terms of the landscape is changing all the time, and maybe we get to a situation where England, they have A, B, C, D, E, F contracts, which gives them scope to do something like that. Under the current model, it doesn't. Like, it's very much, you get ranked in 3 forms, you add the points up, and that's your number. And everyone's known that, and it's actually worked pretty well for an extended period of time. And this flexi contract, it might work really well for Trent, and it might actually work well for New Zealand cricket. But it does open up a whole can of worms where many players that have sacrificed a lot, and not many of them would have the same opportunities that Trent would be offered, because they're not quite as good, but they'd still have some. It just makes it really untidy. And look, I think we all want the best players playing for New Zealand. If at key times, I think we all want that. We've all talked about we want Trent in the team at the World Cup. But there does need to be some sacrifices made. And to be fair, the IPL pays very well. And if you want the IPL and you want 2 or 3 or 4 other tournaments as well, you probably can't have everything. And that's a decision that you've got to make at the start of the year. And I just think the flexi contracts just make it a bit untidy.
Your thoughts, Hess? Ajaz Patel, he doesn't get a contract. I know we talk a lot about spin-friendly conditions here in New Zealand, but, we go overseas, and sometimes you need spinners in New Zealand too, otherwise we wouldn't have them at all, you know what I mean? So where do you sit on him missing out? Or should he have got a flexi one? It's
probably twofold, Laura. I think it's probably the fact that Ajaz went to Pakistan and and probably didn't grab his opportunity in terms of how he could bowl in those Asian conditions. And, probably both from a run rate perspective and from a creating opportunity point of view. Be fair to say the captain sort of didn't lean on him as much as he could because he looked like he lost a little bit of confidence. And then it's probably also the fact that Mitch Sattner has had a tremendous domestic season in the longer form of the game. And obviously he offers that ability to bat at 7. And his record in the longer form in the last 12 to 18 months has gone whoosh, considering where he was. I mean, he was promoted to Test cricket, having not played a lot of first-class cricket. He was probably promoted on the back of one-day cricket. Hadn't played a huge amount, probably didn't know how to bowl in the longer form. And now he's gone away because he's been dropped. He's gone back to Northern Districts, and he's actually won some games for his team. Not one, not two. He won more than that, and both with bat and ball. So it's probably the fact that Mitch Sattner's probably jumped ahead of him, and the fact that Ajaz wasn't able to grab that opportunity in Pakistan.
What do you reckon, Macca? Do you think we should see or will see Mitch back in the Test setup at some point?
We could do. I tend to agree with you. So I feel a little bit sorry for Ajaz Patel. It was only 4 Test matches ago that he was picking up 10 for in Mumbai. And I sort of feel that at times when he's played for New Zealand, he hasn't been used that well. He's always been a last resort to throw the ball to, an over before lunch, an over here and over there. But in New Zealand, with our 4 seamers being so successful and so dominant, his role was a bit part role. So I feel a little bit sorry for him because I still think he's an excellent red ball bowler. He's got over 250 first-class wickets. And I tend to agree, didn't perhaps take his opportunity in Pakistan, which might have counted against him, but he is a quality bowler. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. I'm sure he'll still tour overseas because when you tour Bangladesh and India, these countries, Sri Lanka, you tend to take at least 3 spinners, and he's in the top 3 spinners in New Zealand still, even though he doesn't have a contract. Mitch Sattner, I think, has shown some good improvement, some good development in terms of red ball cricket, and also with the bat, which has been encouraging because I think we've always seen the talent he possesses with the bat. We perhaps haven't seen the output that we would have liked from him over a period of time, but he's close to 30 now, I think, in terms of age. He's played a lot of cricket, so perhaps as a spinner, his best years are still to come in the next 4 or 5 years.
What's frightening is when we start to talk about the ages of some of these players that I feel like we've seen for a long time and you realise they're still that much younger than you. Wow. Okay, great. Okay, so that's what's going on with the Black Caps contracted list. I want to get, though, because we've been doing this in the build-up, Macca, to the 50-over World Cup, I would love to know your favourite World Cup moment from 50-over cricket.
Well, I was thinking there's so many games you could choose. I was thinking back to a game at the 2019 World Cup, actually. It was
Please don't do the final. We had Roscoe on the other day and I got really upset because he said the final and I can't go back.
No, please. I can't believe he did. It's still a bit raw. But we played the West Indies, actually, at Old Trafford. And it ended up being a humdinger of a match. I think we got 280-odd with the bat, which is a pretty good total on a pretty good wicket at Old Trafford. Had the West Indies in all sorts of trouble at 160 for 7. Game was pretty much over. Well, most games are supposed to be over at that stage. And then Carlos Braithwaite came out and decided to play an innings out of the blue that really put us under pressure. And I think he took something like 28 runs off the 48th over from Matt Henry. Sixes were being blasted all over the place. Then Jimmy Neesham bowled the 49th over, and Jimmy hasn't had the best of times occasionally at the death with the ball, but he managed to come to the party. I think they needed 6 to win, and Carlos Braithwaite had a flat, humming ball that was going for 6. It was like a bullet, and Trent Boult took a catch at long on that if he didn't there and he didn't take the catch, it would have gone for 6 and we would have got beat. So it was one of those really nerve-wracking games that you know that you had in control, should have won, we're going to win, and then all of a sudden you felt like you were going to lose, and there was a big crowd. So it was one of those exciting games. At the end of it, everyone's feelings and nerves were frayed, to be fair, because we'd been up and down throughout the 50 overs, but we got home just.
I remember being at Old Trafford, sitting with my dad, watching that. There was pims everywhere when we did win because everyone was like, no one talked for a period of time there. It was so scary, and I remember that all too well. Hes, do you remember that match? And because I think Matt Henry bowled all right up front, and then that 47, 48th over that you mentioned there, and all of a sudden it was like the walls were coming in. You're thinking, oh no, Yeah,
I was doing broadcast from India actually, and I was I was having a spell, and then all of a sudden they decided to bring me back in because the game got close again. So I was I was supposed to be on a break, so I came back in, and then pretty much Matt Henry went for that, as you said, 28 off that over, and I was having to discuss where to from here. So, look, obviously Jimmy Neesham, it's a tough role, bowling to death, isn't it? Often very thankless, but Jimmy Neesham and his variations certainly came up trumps there. And that probably certainly gave us that lead in to make the semi-finals. So it was obviously a critical match, and one that, you'd always like to think we were going to get over the line, but there were certainly moments there where you were thinking, what if?
Yeah, what if indeed. And it was good that that World Cup finished after that semi-final and there was no final of that game and it was a draw. So that was good. Hey, guys, I want to thank you both so very much for your time today. Hess has always been brilliant. And Macca, lovely to have you on the show for the first time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Laura.
My pleasure.
Lovely to chat.
Thanks, guys. And thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on No Boundaries.